Right now, as you sit there listening to this, there are quite literally trillions of microscopic bacteria living on the surface of your face.
And thriving deep within your gut, actually.
Exactly. And here is the slightly unsettling yet entirely fascinating truth about that. Those invisible colonies are secretly dictating how fast you age.
They absolutely are. It is a profound mechanism.
So perhaps forget about that astronomically expensive night cream you've just bought for a moment. I mean, we tend to treat our skincare routines with the same straightforward mechanics as fixing a bicycle, don't we?
Oh, constantly. Yes.
You get a spot, you dab some acid on it, you notice a fine line around your eyes, you rub a thick serum into it. We crave this simple, visible cause and effect relationship.
Well, we do. But when you actually look at the cutting edge of dermatological science, that simple bicycle repair kit approach is rendered entirely obsolete. It is a vastly outdated model.
Which is exactly why we are dedicating this entire deep dive to unpacking the reality of it. We have an incredibly dense, fascinating stack of source material to get through today for you.
We certainly do.
We're looking at the official Japanese aesthetic medicine guidelines, which are notoriously rigorous, alongside insights from specialized Campo clinics. Campo being the integration of traditional Eastern medicine with modern clinical practice.
And we also have the latest data on consumer beauty trends, which is quite revealing.
Right. So our mission for you today is simple but ambitious. We are going to separate the clever, seductive marketing hype from the actual rigorous science of skin health and aesthetic intervention.
Because it is crucial that we distill these facts accurately. The aesthetic medicine industry is expanding at a phenomenal rate. And whilst the technology available to us now is undeniably fascinating, it is no longer just about applying a soothing lotion.
No, it really isn't. We are talking about altering cellular functions, manipulating human tissue with lasers and neurotoxins.
Precisely. Understanding the underlying mechanisms, the how and the why, is the only way you, as a consumer and a patient, can make properly informed, safe choices.
Let's start right at the absolute foundation then. Before we even entertain the idea of high-tech lasers or fancy injectables, we have to look inwards.
We absolutely must.
The insights from the Campo Clinic source present this brilliant, slightly humbling philosophy. They argue that trying to treat the skin without first addressing the internal state of the body is essentially like trying to grow a vibrant, delicate flower in completely toxic soil.
It is a profound analogy.
Yeah.
And from a purely clinical biochemical perspective, it is entirely accurate. In aesthetic medicine, we refer to this as the inner ecosystem.
The inner ecosystem. I like that.
Yes, because you simply cannot achieve robust, lasting external improvements if your internal metabolic mechanisms are failing. It doesn't matter how much you polish the petals if the roots are rotting, as it were.
So what are the roots then? The clinical sources highlight 4 major lifestyle factors that dictate the health of this internal soil, right?
They do. And the first, and arguably the most critical for cellular regeneration, is sleep. But we need to move beyond the generic advice of just getting 8 hours. The literature specifically zeroes in on the timing of that sleep.
Right, the famous golden window. The sources are incredibly specific here. They highlight the hours strictly between 10 at night and 2 in the morning.
Yes, 2200 to 0200 hours.
Now, I have to challenge this immediately, because what if I am a night owl? What if my 8 hours of perfectly uninterrupted sleep happens between 2 in the morning and 10 in the morning?
It is a very common question, to be fair.
Why are those specific 4 hours before 2 a.m. so biologically magical?
The answer lies entirely in human evolutionary biology and our circadian rhythms. Your body operates on an internal 24-hour clock that is deeply tied to the Earth's cycle of light and dark.
Okay, so it's tied to the actual sun setting.
Exactly. When the sun goes down, your body begins a cascade of hormonal shifts. Provided you are asleep and entering the deepest phases of rest during that specific window, your pituitary gland, which is a tiny pea-sized organ at the base of your brain, secretes its highest daily concentration of human growth hormone, or HGH.
Right, and what exactly is HGH doing whilst I'm unconscious?
Well, you can think of human growth hormone as the body's master internal repair mechanic. During the day, your skin is in a defensive state. It is actively fighting off UV rays, pollution, mechanical stress.
Just surviving the day, basically.
Precisely. But at night, under the influence of HGH, the skin switches into a highly active regenerative state. HGH stimulates cellular mitosis.
Which means what, exactly, in everyday terms?
It simply means it forces your skin cells to divide and multiply, replacing the damaged ones. It also ramps up the production of new collagen and elastin fibers.
Wow. So it's actively rebuilding the face.
It is. So if you consistently stay awake past midnight, scrolling on your phone and exposed to blue light,
Mhm.
you suppress that hormonal release. You are essentially canceling the nightly maintenance crew.
I see. So if I'm surviving on a chaotic sleep schedule and then simply slapping on a 100-pound night cream to compensate, I'm effectively trying to paint over a crumbling brick wall.
That is exactly what you are doing. The bricks themselves, the cells are structurally degrading because they haven't had their factory reset.
No topical cream can fix that, can it?
None. Regardless of its price tag, a cream cannot replicate the systemic, full-body cellular repair triggered by a natural flood of growth hormone. It is a biological impossibility.
Which brings us smoothly, yet rather alarmingly, to the second foundational factor, our diet. Specifically, a deeply destructive biochemical process called glycation.
Glycation is a major hurdle in aesthetic medicine.
I have to admit, glycation was a massive revelation for me whilst reading through these dermatological papers. We all loosely know that sugar is bad for us, but the actual mechanism is terrifying. Let's break this down carefully. Please do.
Glycation, in the simplest terms, is what happens when you have excess sugar floating around in your bloodstream. And those sugar molecules permanently bind to the proteins in your body, making them stiff and inflexible.
That is the exact mechanism. And when we talk about aesthetic medicine, the proteins we care most about are collagen and elastin.
Because they keep the skin looking young.
Precisely. In a healthy state, your collagen fibers are supple, springy, and resilient. They give young skin its bounce. But when you consume excessive amounts of refined carbohydrates and simple sugars, well, things change rapidly.
The sugar basically attacks the collagen.
Yes. Those rogue sugar molecules crash into the collagen fibers and attach themselves, creating what we call advanced glycation end products, appropriately acronymized as AGs.
AGs. The medical community certainly enjoys a heavy-handed acronym, don't they?
They do. But the physical transformation of the tissue is what's so striking here. The sources compare it directly to a process we see in the kitchen every day.
Oh, the toast analogy. Yes, it is virtually identical to the Maillard reaction in cooking. Exactly. Think of taking a soft, white, pliable piece of bread and putting it into a toaster. The application of heat causes the sugars and amino acids in the bread to react, cross-linking with one another.
And the bread turns brown, rigid, and brittle. It becomes toast.
Spot on. On a microscopic level, that is exactly what is happening to the collagen in your face when you maintain a high-sugar diet. The fibers become cross-linked, rigid, and discolored.
They literally get toasted.
They do. This physiological toasting leads directly to visible premature sagging, deep structural wrinkles, and a very distinct yellowish, sallow dullness in the complexion. And no amount of surface exfoliation can fix that internal damage.
That is a haunting image. Every time I look at a sugary pastry now, I'm just going to picture my dermal layer turning into a piece of hard toast.
It is a very effective deterrent.
It completely shifts the perspective, though, from sugar making you gain weight to sugar structurally degrading your tissue. But thankfully, the clinical sources do offer a biological defense mechanism against this, don't they? Antioxidants.
Indeed. If glycation is the process of oxidative stress and degradation, antioxidants are the molecules that intercept and neutralize that damage.
They act as chemical bodyguards.
Exactly. The dermatologists in our sources highly recommend ensuring a robust intake of vitamins C and E. You find these abundantly in deep blue-colored berries like blueberries and kale in green tea, and rather brilliantly in dark chocolate.
Oh, yes, the dark chocolate exception.
Provided it is 70% cacao or higher, yes.
Sure.
These specific foods contain compounds that actively interfere with the cross-linking process, fighting the cellular aging cascade from the inside out.
Well, I will gladly accept a clinical mandate to eat more dark chocolate, so we have sleep building the wall, and our diet either defending it or breaking it down. The third pillar of this inner ecosystem is hydration.
A very misunderstood pillar, I might add.
Definitely. Now, the baseline recommendation across the board is 1.5 to 2 liters of water or herbal tea daily, but the sources are incredibly pedantic about one specific caveat. Your daily coffees absolutely do not count towards this hydration goal.
And they are scientifically justified in being pedantic about it. The issue lies with caffeine acting as a diuretic.
Right. And to define that simply, a diuretic is any substance that promotes increased production of urine by the kidneys. It physically forces your body to expel water.
Spot on. So if you are sitting at your desk drinking 3 cups of coffee and no water, you are operating at a severe hydration deficit. You are losing more fluid than you are taking in.
And how does that internal deficit manifest on the face? Does the skin just dry out like a leaf?
It's more systemic than that. It comes down to bodily priorities and osmotic balance. Your body is incredibly intelligent, and its primary goal is survival.
So it hoards the water.
Exactly. If you are internally dehydrated, the body will instinctively pull water away from non-essential organs like your skin to supply vital organs like the brain, heart, and liver.
Oh, wow. So the skin is essentially the last organ to receive hydration and the first to have it taken away.
Precisely. When the dermal layers are robbed of moisture, the skin looks instantly deflated. Tissue turgor drops, and fine lines become drastically exacerbated.
It's a stark reminder that everything is interconnected. The body operates as a single, unified economy.
It really does.
And speaking of connections, the fourth and final internal pillar we need to discuss is perhaps the most fascinating: stress and the gut-skin axis.
A massively expanding field of research right now.
We use the word stress so casually in daily life, but the medical mechanism outlined in the research is highly specific and physical. When we experience psychological stress, our bodies flood with cortisol, the primary fight-or-flight hormone.
Yes.
And according to the dermatological sources, this cortisol physically dismantles the skin's protective barrier.
It does. Cortisol is a highly catabolic hormone, meaning it breaks things down. When cortisol levels remain chronically elevated, say, from a highly demanding job or financial anxiety, it actively degrades the skin's natural lipid barrier.
And that lipid barrier is the oily, invisible shield on the surface of your skin that traps moisture in and keeps environmental irritants out, right?
Exactly. When cortisol breaks that shield down, you experience rapid transepidermal water loss, leaving the skin highly vulnerable. But what is truly groundbreaking here is the parallel research connecting this stress response to the gut.
Right, the research from the Yakult Central Institute, this blew my mind. They highlight that our gut microbiota, the trillions of symbiotic bacteria living inside our intestines, directly dictates our skin's homeostasis.
Which is just the medical term for maintaining a stable, healthy internal balance.
Exactly. So my question is, how on earth are the bacteria in my stomach communicating with the skin on my forehead? It sounds bizarre.
It happens through a highly complex biochemical feedback loop. When you are chronically stressed, the resulting hormonal cocktail alters the motility of your gut and changes its pH.
It changes the environment of the stomach.
Yes, this hostile environment kills off beneficial bacteria and allows pathogenic, harmful bacteria to overgrow. This state is called dysbiosis.
Dysbiosis.
When your gut microbiome is in dysbiosis, those bad bacteria produce inflammatory markers and toxins. These markers leak through the intestinal wall, enter the bloodstream, and travel systemically throughout the body.
And eventually they reach the skin.
They do. And when they reach the skin, they trigger massive inflammatory responses. This internal distress signal manifests visually as adult acne, rosacea flare-ups, eczema, or simply a stubborn, unresolvable dullness.
So an acne breakout on the chin might not be a hygiene issue at all. It could literally be an SOS signal from an inflamed intestine.
It very often is. That is a total paradigm shift in dermatology.
It really is. Now, to combat this, the doctors in our sources don't immediately prescribe heavy antibiotics. Instead, they suggest surprisingly simple daily physical habits to break the stress cycle and calm the nervous system.
They do. And their approach is deeply rooted in human physiology. They don't suggest impossible lifestyle overhauls.
Which is refreshing.
Very. They prescribe a 15-minute warm bath to artificially boost peripheral blood flow, followed by light stretching to release trapped muscular tension.
But the most interesting part was what they advocate next. The physical act of taking slow, deep breaths and intentionally smiling.
Yes, the smiling aspect always catches people off guard.
It sounds almost too simple, bordering on a cliche, just smile and breathe. But there is a hard neurological reason why that works, isn't there?
There is nothing cliché about the vagus nerve.
The vagus nerve.
Yes. The vagus nerve is the superhighway of communication between your brain and your internal organs, including the gut. Deep, diaphragmatic breathing and the physical muscular contraction of a genuine smile actually stimulate this nerve.
So the physical act of moving the smile muscles sends a signal down the highway?
Precisely. When the vagus nerve is stimulated, it activates the parasympathetic nervous system. This is your body's rest and digest mode, the direct antagonist to the fight-or-flight response.
It actively fights the stress.
It does. It actively lowers circulating cortisol, slows the heart rate, and drastically reduces that inflammatory cascade stemming from the gut. It is the most perfect example of how manipulating the physical state of the body directly dictates the visual, aesthetic state of the skin.
It is utterly brilliant. So we've established that the internal soil must be cultivated. We need our sleep window, our antioxidants, our water, and a calm vagus nerve.
The essential foundation.
But once that internal foundation is secure, we have to look outward. How do we protect this delicate ecosystem from external enemies? And the biggest, most relentless culprit is, unequivocally, the sun.
Without a doubt.
But I have to say, trying to decode UV rays and sunscreen labels often feels like trying to read an advanced physics textbook. It's so confusing for the average person.
It can certainly feel daunting for the consumer. But Dr. Hojo, a prominent medical doctor specializing in regenerative medicine featured extensively in our sources, breaks the physics down quite elegantly.
Okay, let's go through his breakdown.
Ultraviolet light emitted from the sun isn't just one thing. It arrives in different wavelengths. A wavelength is simply the physical distance between the peaks of the light wave.
Right, like waves on a beach.
Exactly. In dermatology, we categorize these into UVA, UVB, and UVC. Now, UVC is highly ionizing and extremely dangerous, but thankfully it is almost completely absorbed by the Earth's ozone layer, so it is largely irrelevant to our daily skincare concerns.
Okay, so the battlefield consists of UVA and UVB. Let's start with UVA. These are the longer light waves measuring between 320 and 400 nanometers, correct?
That's right.
And because they have a longer wavelength, they're able to penetrate much deeper into human tissue,
Right.
bypassing the surface and going straight down into the dermis.
Yes. And just to clarify for everyone listening, the dermis is the thick interstructural layer of the skin. It's the scaffolding where your collagen and elastin live.
Right, and this deep penetration makes UVA particularly insidious, doesn't it?
It does. Because it hits that deep structural scaffolding, it doesn't cause a superficial burn. You don't feel it happening.
You don't get red or hot.
Exactly. Instead, it slowly, silently degrades and fragments the collagen matrix over decades. UVA is the primary, overarching culprit behind profound structural aging. The deep wrinkles, the loss of elasticity, and the severe sagging we associate with advanced age.
And it penetrates through clouds and window glass, meaning you are exposed to it constantly. A silent destroyer.
A very apt description. Now, UVB, on the other hand, consists of shorter waves, measuring 280 to 320 nanometers.
So because they are shorter and more energetic, they don't penetrate as deeply.
Precisely. They crash violently into the epidermis, which is the thin, protective outermost layer of the skin.
Okay, so UVA goes deep, UVB hits the surface.
Exactly. UVB is the radiation that causes immediate acute damage. It is responsible for the painful red sunburns. More crucially, from an aesthetic standpoint, UVB damages the DNA in your epidermal cells.
It damages the actual DNA.
Yes. And in response to this DNA damage, your body panics. It stimulates the melanocytes, the pigment-producing cells, to churn out melanin. The body is desperately trying to create a dark umbrella over the cell's nucleus to protect it from further radiation.
Ah, so a tan is just the body panicking.
Essentially, yes. And that overproduction of melanin is what leads to hyperpigmentation, dark spots, and freckles.
So sunburn and dark spots from the B rays, and deep wrinkles and sagging from the A rays, which brings us to the actual bottles of sunscreen. When we look at a label, we see two entirely different rating systems, SPF and PA.
Yes, the letters that confuse everyone.
Based on the physics you just explained, SPF indicates the level of protection against the burning UVB rays. Meanwhile, the PA rating, which is followed by those little plus signs, dictates the level of protection against the aging UVA rays.
That is the perfect translation of the labels. But this is where Dr. Hojo makes a highly pragmatic clinical intervention regarding consumer habits.
Oh, about the overapplication.
Yes. People have been conditioned to believe that they need the absolute highest level of protection at all hours of the day. They are slathering on heavy SPF 50-plus formulations just to sit in a dimly lit office.
And Dr. Hojo strongly advises against this. He argues that for daily, normal life commuting, popping out to the shops an SPF of 30 with a PA++ rating is more than sufficient. You must save the SPF 50 for a day of intense, direct exposure at the beach or playing outdoor sports.
He is quite adamant about it.
But why the restriction? I mean, if I want maximum protection, why shouldn't I wear SPF 50 every single day just to be safe?
Because you must consider the chemical burden on the skin. To achieve an SPF of 50, cosmetic chemists must load the formulation with high concentrations of UV-absorbing chemicals or dense physical blockers like zinc oxide.
Which makes the cream really thick and heavy.
Extremely heavy, These formulations are inherently more occlusive and vastly more difficult to wash off at the end of the day. This requires aggressive cleansing, which degrades that delicate lipid barrier we spoke about earlier.
So scrubbing off the heavy sunscreen ruins the skin's natural defense.
Precisely. Using SPF 50 daily when you don't need it can inadvertently lead to clogged pores, contact dermatitis, and chronic dehydration.
That makes perfect sense. The cure becomes part of the problem. And I really appreciated Dr. Hojo's approach to the actual application of the product, what he calls the lazy application rule.
It is brilliant in its simplicity.
He points out that consumers are bombarded by beauty influencers demonstrating these elaborate, multi-step sunscreen routines, applying it in perfect, measured layers, waiting for it to dry, reapplying with sponges. It's exhausting.
It is entirely unsustainable for the average person.
Exactly. Dr. Hojo argues that this overcomplication is actually causing people to quit entirely. His medical advice is shockingly simple. Take an amount the size of a 10 yen coin, which, for reference, is roughly the size of a British 10-pence piece, rub it between your palms, and simply smear it evenly over your face and neck.
Don't overthink it. Don't worry about perfect layering. Just get the active ingredient onto the tissue.
It's a fantastic observation of human psychology intersecting with medical compliance, isn't it?
It really is. In medicine, perfect is very often the enemy of good. If a preventative routine is too complex, tedious, or expensive, patient compliance inevitably drops to zero.
They just give up.
Exactly.
Yeah.
A hastily but thoroughly applied 10-pence size layer of SPF 30 every single morning will yield vastly superior long-term aesthetic results than a perfectly executed SPF 50 routine that the patient abandons after 3 weeks because it's too bothersome.
Consistency over perfection. But whilst we're demonizing the sun, we have to acknowledge the elephant in the room here. The sun isn't purely evil.
No, certainly not.
Isn't it fascinating to think that comprehensive, obsessive UV protection only really became a mainstream concept about 50 or 60 years ago? For the vast majority of human history, people worked outside.
They did. We evolved under it.
Right, so how do we reconcile this modern aesthetic obsession with the biological reality that we actually need ultraviolet radiation to synthesize vitamin D? We need vitamin D for our bone density, for a robust immune system, and fundamentally to ward off seasonal depression.
It is vital for our health.
So how do we balance that biological necessity without turning the skin on our face into an old, weathered leather boot?
It is a profound, delicate balancing act, and it requires a nuanced understanding of evolutionary biology. As you said, the human body evolved under the sun. The production of melanin isn't a disease, it is a brilliant evolutionary defense mechanism.
The body protecting itself.
Yes.
Okay.
The medical consensus is that we do not want people living in dark caves. Brief, unprotected sun exposure is necessary. Depending on your geographic latitude and your inherent skin tone, exposing a large surface area of your body, such as your arms and legs, for perhaps 15 to 20 minutes a day, is often entirely sufficient to trigger adequate vitamin D synthesis.
So the arms and legs are the solar panels.
Exactly. The vital distinction in aesthetic medicine is that we want to purposefully shield the face, neck, and hands. These specific areas are exposed to the elements 365 days a year for your entire life.
They never get a break.
Never. It is the cumulative, excessive damage over decades to those specific, highly visible areas that we are trying to mitigate.
Okay, so get your vitamin D through your legs, but guard your face. I love that. Now, alongside this rigorous sun protection, our sources highlight a massive fundamental shift in how people are actually purchasing their skincare products.
The ingredient buying phenomenon.
Yes, officially dubbed ingredient buying. According to a recent survey of 200 women conducted by a prominent Japanese beauty media outlet, the era of blindly trusting a luxurious brand name or an elegant bottle is ending.
Consumers are becoming incredibly educated.
They are acting like kitchen chemists. They are aggressively seeking out specific, biologically active ingredients. And the reigning champion of this movement, the absolute #1 trending ingredient by a wide margin, is vitamin C.
And from a biochemical standpoint, it makes perfect, undeniable sense why educated consumers are gravitating toward it.
Why is that?
Because vitamin C, or ascorbic acid, is one of the most thoroughly researched, clinically proven topical antioxidants available. Consumers have learned that it effectively targets what they consider the big three aesthetic concerns.
The big three being spots, dullness, and pores.
Spot on. Firstly, it inhibits an enzyme called tyrosinase, which halts the overproduction of melanin, directly feeding dark spots.
It stops the pigment factory.
Exactly. Secondly, it provides an overall brightening effect to the complexion by neutralizing the free radicals that cause dullness. And thirdly, because it is highly acidic, it aids in gentle exfoliation, which minimizes the physical appearance of enlarged pores.
It really does it all. The sources cite products like the Free C vitamin drop as a prime example of this hyper-targeted active ingredient philosophy.
That is a very effective strategy.
But even with these scientifically validated incredible ingredients, the medical sources issue a stark warning against overzealousness, don't they?
They do, quite strongly.
Dr. Ota, an aesthetic physician featured in the literature, introduces this brilliant counterintuitive concept, the no makeup day, instituted strictly once a week.
Yes, a mandated rest period.
The entire premise is to allow the stratum corneum to completely rest. Now, to translate that for you listening, the stratum corneum is simply the outermost layer of your skin. It is composed of dead, flattened skin cells bound together by lipids.
You can visualize it exactly like a microscopic brick wall that guards your internal water supply.
The brick wall analogy again, it's so helpful.
It truly is. The stratum corneum is your frontline defense. Now consider the modern skincare routine. If you are aggressively cleansing every morning, applying highly concentrated acidic active ingredients like vitamin C or retinoids, followed by heavy layers of foundation and setting powders.
And then using chemical solvents to strip it all off at night.
Exactly. You are launching a relentless daily assault on that protective brick wall. Lipids dissolve, the dead cells flake away prematurely, and the barrier function collapses.
Which leads to redness and stinging.
Profound sensitivity and chronic inflammation, yes. Dr. Alkeda's protocol of taking one day entirely off, applying absolutely nothing but a gentle, basic hydrator, allows the skin's natural acid mantle and lipid barrier to physically rebuild.
It's the concept of active recovery, just like taking a rest day after weightlifting.
A perfect comparison.
Dr. Oke has this golden rule that I think should be printed on every cosmetic bottle. He says, it's not about what you use, but what you can continue doing.
It is the absolute truth of dermatology. Consistency with a gentle, supportive routine will always trump sporadic, aggressive, barrier-destroying treatments.
Unquestionably, cellular health is a marathon, not a sprint. Okay, let's take stock of where we are. We've mastered our sleep hygiene. We're intercepting glycation with dark chocolate. We are adequately hydrated. Our vagus nerve is calm. We're casually applying our 10 pence piece of SPF 30, and we are respectfully resting our stratum corneum.
A perfect preventative routine.
We are doing everything perfectly. But let's be brutally honest for a moment. Sometimes, the sheer unrelenting forces of time, gravity, and genetics win the battle.
They invariably do.
Creams and serums eventually hit a biological ceiling. When the structural scaffolding of the face begins to collapse, a topical vitamin C drop isn't going to pull it back up.
No, it is physically incapable of doing so.
This is the pivot point. This is where we step out of our bathroom and into the medical clinic.
This is indeed the crucial threshold. We are officially transitioning from preventative cosmetic maintenance to active clinical medical intervention.
And when you delve into the official Japanese aesthetic medicine guidelines regarding clinic treatments, it is genuinely remarkable to realize how deeply the field relies on advanced physics.
It's pure physics. We are no longer relying on biological absorption. We are essentially deploying highly concentrated forms of physical energy, specifically chemical energy, light energy, and acoustic sound energy.
To purposefully manipulate, traumatize, and reshape human tissue. It reads like absolute science fiction.
It does, but it is highly calibrated science.
Let's methodically break down the menu of these high-tech energy devices, starting with the oldest and arguably least invasive modality, chemical peeling.
A classic, but highly effective treatment.
This involves painting the face with specific controlled acids, typically salicylic or lactic acid. The goal here is to safely and uniformly melt away the accumulated layers of dead skin and hardened sebum.
Precisely. It's a chemical exfoliation designed to forcefully command the skin to turn over fresh cells.
But it remains a strictly superficial treatment, doesn't it?
It does. It acts entirely on the epidermis. But when a patient presents with issues located much deeper in the skin, such as stubborn hyperpigmentation or broken capillaries, we must switch from chemical energy to light energy.
And the first tier of this light energy is IPL, which stands for intense pulsed light.
Yes. And it is absolutely vital to understand that IPL is not a laser.
Oh, really? I always assumed IPL was just a brand of laser.
It's a very common misconception. It uses incoherent, broad-spectrum light. You can visualize it as an incredibly powerful, incredibly bright camera flash.
A camera flash, okay.
Because it utilizes a wide, scattered range of wavelengths simultaneously, it acts as a broad sweep. It targets various color noises in the skin all at once.
Color noises. I like that phrase.
Yes. A single flash will simultaneously hit the brown melanin in a sunspot and the red hemoglobin in a broken blood vessel.
So IPL is the ultimate multitasker. It's a shotgun approach rather than a sniper rifle.
Spot on. That's exactly how we describe it.
It's generally less painful than a true laser. It can cover a much wider surface area of the face quickly. But because the energy is scattered, I assume it's perhaps a bit less aggressive for severe, deeply rooted issues.
Yes, it is slightly less efficient for things like targeted hair removal or very dark, dense pigmentation.
Right. Now, contrast that shotgun approach with actual true lasers, which are used to obliterate stubborn spots, birthmarks, and moles. When we talk about true lasers, we encounter a medical term that sounds incredibly intimidating: selective photothermolysis.
It is a phenomenal mouthful, I admit.
It really is.
But the underlying concept is one of the most beautifully elegant principles in modern medicine. Let's break the word down. Photo means light, thermo means heat, and lysis means destruction.
Light, heat, destruction.
Okay. Selective photothermolysis is the exact science of using a single, highly concentrated, specific wavelength of light to seek out, heat, and destroy only one highly specific target, known as a chromophore.
Whilst leaving the surrounding healthy tissue completely untouched.
Exactly.
It's like an opera singer hitting the exact perfect pitch to shatter one specific crystal glass on a table without rattling the normal water glasses sitting right next to it.
That is a phenomenal analogy. Yes,
Yep.
It is pure targeted physics.
The guidelines heavily reference devices like the Q-switched alexandrite and the N.YAG lasers.
Yes, the workhorses of the aesthetic clinic.
These machines emit light at exact wavelengths that are eagerly absorbed by dark melanin pigment, but ignored by normal skin cells. Furthermore, they pulse this energy in mere nanoseconds.
They fire so fast that the pigment absorbs the massive heat and physically shatters into microscopic dust before that heat has a chance to spread and burn the surrounding healthy skin.
It shatters the pigment right under the skin. But wait, where does the shattered pigment go? Does it just sit there in the tissue?
This is where the physics hands the baton back to the biology. Once the laser has shattered the melanin boulder into tiny pebbles, your body's immune system takes over.
The immune system.
Yes. Specifically, white blood cells called macrophages, which literally translates to big eaters.
Big eaters, that's wonderfully descriptive.
Isn't it? These big eaters arrive at the site, engulf the microscopic pigment particles, and carry them away through the lymphatic system to be naturally excreted by the body.
So the laser does the demolition and your immune system handles the waste removal.
Precisely. The body is the cleanup crew.
That is staggeringly brilliant. So we've used light to clear the color noise. But what about the physical topography of the face? What about deep wrinkles, textural scarring, and sagging?
That requires a different approach entirely.
That brings us to fractional lasers, often abbreviated as FLSR. Now, I read the clinical description of this, and it sounds decidedly brutal. The machine physically vaporizes and evaporates tiny, microscopic columns straight down into the skin.
I concede that the terminology vaporization of tissues sounds barbaric, but it is in fact a highly calculated microscopic trauma.
Calculated trauma.
Older generation lasers used to burn off the entire top layer of the face, which required weeks of agonizing recovery and carried a huge risk of scarring.
The old resurfacing lasers, they looked horrific.
A fractional laser, as the name implies, only treats a fraction of the skin. It fires a grid of microscopic laser beams, vaporizing thousands of tiny vertical channels deep into the dermis.
But crucially, it leaves completely healthy, untouched skin surrounding each of these microscopic wounds, right? Let me push back here, though. We've spent this entire time talking about protecting the skin, guarding the barrier, preventing damage. And now we are paying a doctor thousands of pounds to literally punch thousands of vaporized holes into our face. How does intentionally damaging the skin save it?
Because we are exploiting the body's evolutionary survival mechanism.
We are tricking it.
Exactly. By creating these highly controlled micro-injuries, we trick the body into believing it has sustained a massive traumatic wound. The brain immediately triggers an overwhelming wound-healing cascade.
It rushes to fix the damage.
Yes. It sends a flood of blood, oxygen, and specialized cells called fibroblasts to the area. These fibroblasts frantically begin synthesizing massive amounts of fresh, dense collagen and elastin to repair the perceived damage.
And because we left healthy tissue surrounding each microscopic hole, the healing is incredibly rapid.
Precisely. As the new collagen forms, it physically thickens the dermis, plumping up deep wrinkles and smoothing out acne scars from the inside out.
We are destroying the old degraded tissue to force the body to build a newer, stronger foundation. It's controlled demolition to force a rebuild.
That is exactly what it is.
And we see this exact same principle of exploiting trauma with the next category, RF, or radio frequency devices. But RF doesn't use light at all. It uses electromagnetic waves.
Yes, a completely different form of energy.
Which, the sources note, is the exact same fundamental technology as a household microwave, albeit at highly calibrated, safe medical frequencies.
That is correct. RF technology causes what we call dielectric heating.
Dielectric heating, can you explain that simply?
Certainly. When the radio frequency waves penetrate the dermal tissue, they cause the water molecules deep within the skin to rapidly flip back and forth millions of times per second.
It sounds intense, it is.
This frantic movement generates intense friction, and that friction creates deep, uniform heat.
So we are essentially cooking the dermis.
Safely, yes. We heat the deep collagen fibers to approximately 60 degrees Celsius. At this exact temperature, the structural bonds within the collagen triple helix begin to break and reform.
And what happens visually when that occurs?
The collagen fibers physically contract and tighten immediately. You can visualize it exactly like putting a loose wool jumper into a hot wash. The heat causes the fibers to shrink and pull tightly together.
Shrinking the wool jumper. I love that visual.
The immediate result is a visible tightening of the skin, followed by months of new collagen production triggered by that thermal stress.
Fascinating. And taking this concept of deep thermal manipulation to the absolute extreme, we arrive at HIFU, high-intensity focused
A
ultrasound.
truly revolutionary device.
This device doesn't use light, and it doesn't use radio waves. It uses pure acoustic sound. It fires sound waves deep beneath the skin to specifically target something called the SMAS.
This MAS layer, yes.
To explain simply for everyone listening, the SMAS, which stands for the superficial musculoponeurotic system, is the deep, tough layer of muscle and connective tissue that acts as the foundational scaffolding for your entire face.
It is.
It is the exact specific layer of muscle that a plastic surgeon physically cuts, pulls tight, and stitches during a traditional, bloody surgical facelift.
Exactly. The SMAS is the holy grail of facial lifting. For decades, the only way to tighten it was with a scalpel.
But with HIFU, the sound waves are designed to pass completely harmlessly through the surface of the skin. They only converge and cross paths at the exact, precise depth of the SMAS layer.
Correct. And where those sound waves intersect, they create intense, localized focal points of extreme heat, around 65 to 70 degrees Celsius.
Causing tiny, controlled thermal injuries directly in the muscle layer.
Yes.
Wait, hold on. We are purposefully inflicting thermal burns on the foundational muscle of the face. How is creating scar tissue deep in the face safe long term? Doesn't the muscle lose its function?
It is a very valid concern, and it's exactly why the depth and energy must be perfectly calibrated by a trained professional. We're not destroying the muscle entirely. We are creating tiny, microscopic dots of coagulation.
Okay, dots of heat.
Yes. When the SMAS tissue is heated to that degree, the muscular fibers instantly shrink and contract. As it heals, the tissue remodels and pulls tighter. You are physically shrinking the scaffolding of the face, achieving a measurable mechanical lift of the jawline and cheeks without a single surgical incision.
It is a true marvel of matching exact physical acoustic wavelength to highly specific anatomical depths. It is breathtaking engineering.
It really is a triumph of medical physics.
But let's pause. Up until this point, every single energy device we've discussed, lasers, RF, HIFU, relies entirely on stimulating the body to rebuild its own tissue.
It's manipulating the body's own resources.
Oh, what happens when the body's natural collagen simply isn't enough? What happens when we have to physically introduce a foreign substance into the face or artificially paralyze a working muscle?
We are moving away from physics and entering the realm of chemistry and anatomy.
Exactly. Injectables and threads. Let's start with the undisputed heavyweight champion of aesthetics, botulinum toxin, commonly known as Botox. How exactly does a purified bacterial toxin manage to erase a deep frown line?
Well, it operates entirely on a neurological level. It does not directly affect the skin at all.
It doesn't touch the skin.
Not directly, no. To understand Botox, you must understand the neuromuscular junction. When your brain wants you to frown, it sends an electrical signal down a nerve. When the signal reaches the end of the nerve, it triggers the release of a chemical messenger called acetylcholine.
Okay, the messenger chemical.
This chemical crosses the gap, binds to the muscle, and tells it to forcefully contract, which folds the skin above it. Botox is a neurotoxic protein that physically enters the nerve ending and acts like a pair of biochemical scissors.
Scissors, what is it cutting?
It chops up the transport proteins, the snare proteins that are required to release the acetylcholine.
Oh, I see. It fundamentally severs the communication line. It turns off the Wi-Fi router to the muscle.
Precisely. If the messenger chemical cannot be released, the muscle simply cannot receive the command to move. It remains in a state of relaxed paralysis.
And if the underlying muscle cannot forcefully contract, the skin above it is no longer repeatedly folded.
Exactly. And dynamic expression wrinkles like the deep, vertical 11 lines between your eyebrows gradually smooth out.
The clinical guidelines note that Botox is generally very safe, and crucially for patient peace of mind, it is temporary and entirely reversible. The nerve endings eventually sprout new connections, and movement returns in a few months.
Yes, it is very transient.
But they do mandate a serious discussion regarding side effects, the most notorious being a temporary ptosis. Ptosis is the medical term for a severe drooping eyelid, correct?
Yes, and it is a stark reminder of the anatomical precision required. If a practitioner injects the toxin slightly too low on the forehead, or uses too high a dilution, causing the liquid to migrate under the skin, well, it can inadvertently seep into the levator palpebrae superioris,
Which is what, exactly?
the delicate muscle responsible for lifting your upper eyelid. If that muscle is paralyzed, you physically cannot open your eye fully. You are left with a heavy, drooping lid.
That sounds terrifying.
It is temporary, as the toxin will inevitably wear off, but living with a half-closed eye for 3 months is deeply distressing. It underscores a fundamental truth about injectables.
Which is?
You're not just buying a vial of liquid. You are paying for the practitioner's profound, intimate understanding of facial muscular mechanics.
Which brings us to the other massive pillar of injectables, fillers, specifically those made from hyaluronic acid, or HA.
The most common dermal filler globally.
Now, the marketing around HA is incredibly reassuring, isn't it? We are told that hyaluronic acid is a completely natural sugar molecule already abundant in the human body, acting as a sponge to hold water.
Yes, it is highly biocompatible.
The medical guidelines strongly recommend using HA fillers to physically restore lost volume in the cheeks and fill in deep structural crevices like the laugh lines. It sounds perfectly safe, natural, and harmonious with the body.
It is an exceptionally effective treatment for volume loss, yes. However, this is where we must have a very serious, sobering conversation.
Right.
This raises a vitally important question of clinical safety that the consumer industry often glosses over. Just because the substance itself is a natural sugar does not mean the physical procedure of injecting it is without profound risk.
No.
The Japanese medical guidelines demand that doctors seriously discuss a rare but utterly catastrophic complication: irreversible blindness.
Right. This specific section of the guidelines made me physically stop reading. I need you to explain this mechanism clearly because it defies common sense. How on earth does injecting a harmless natural sugar gel into a laugh line around the mouth cause a patient to permanently lose their vision?
It is entirely due to the complex vascular anatomy of the human face. The arteries and blood vessels in the face are not isolated pipes. They are highly interconnected. They form a vast, intricate network called an anastomosis.
An anastomosis. You can visualize it as a deeply interconnected system of rivers and tributaries, basically.
Exactly. Now, if an undertrained practitioner is injecting filler deep into a wrinkle, say, the nasolabial fold next to the nose, and they accidentally pierce the facial artery with a needle, they are now inside the vascular system.
They're inside the river.
Exactly. And if they press the plunger and inject that thick, viscous HA gel directly into the artery, the pressure from the syringe can momentarily overpower the patient's own blood pressure.
Oh, no.
This forces the thick gel to travel backwards up the arterial system. We call it retrograde flow. Because the rivers are connected, that gel can be pushed straight up into the ophthalmic artery, which is the sole blood supply to the retina of the eye.
It pushes the gel all the way up to the eye.
Yes. The gel forms a solid blockage called an embolism. It dams the river. If the retina is deprived of oxygenated blood for more than about 90 minutes, the tissue dies. The blindness is permanent and irreversible.
If the river is blocked, the eye dies. That is chilling. It just proves that natural doesn't mean foolproof if it is forcefully deposited into the wrong anatomical structure.
It is a devastating complication.
And this specific risk of migration, obstruction, and tissue interference leads to a massive, glaring paradox in the medical guidelines regarding another highly requested procedure: breast augmentation.
This is an incredibly critical divergence in the medical literature.
While hyaluronic acid filler is officially and strongly recommended for restoring volume in the face, the official Japanese guidelines issue a level 1 warning, which is the strongest possible medical warning, advising explicitly and strongly against using massive volumes of HA fillers to enlarge the breasts.
They absolutely forbid it.
Why such a severe black and white difference? If the body accepts the HA gel in the cheek, why is it medically condemned for the breast tissue?
Because of the paramount importance of cancer screening. The breast is glandular tissue that must be regularly screened for malignancies.
Okay, for mammograms.
Yes. When you inject hundreds of milliliters of thick hyaluronic acid gel into the breast, it creates dense, artificial masses and shadows. These massive pools of gel are radiopaque. They severely interfere with the physical imaging of mammograms and the acoustic waves of ultrasound screenings.
They block the camera.
They can completely obscure, hide, and mask a developing breast cancer tumor. The risk of a radiologist missing a life-threatening cancer diagnosis because it was hidden behind a wall of cosmetic filler is so unacceptably high that the U.S. FDA strictly prohibits HA fillers for breasts.
And the European guidelines as well, right?
Yes, in Europe, the CE safety mark for a heavily marketed breast filler called Macrolane was entirely revoked for this exact reason.
That is a staggering reality check. Aesthetics can never, ever compromise diagnostic medicine.
Never.
And along those same lines, the guidelines also issue a strict, uncompromising warning against the use of non-absorbable permanent fillers, substances like polyacrylamide gels or liquid silicone used anywhere in the body.
Permanent fillers are an absolute minefield.
If an infection occurs with a permanent synthetic filler, or if the body mounts a severe immune response and forms rock-hard nodules called granulomas around it, or if the gel simply succumbs to gravity and migrates down the face, it is practically impossible for a surgeon to completely remove it, isn't it?
It is a nightmare for reconstructive surgeons. The plastic integrates and entwines with the healthy tissue. The patient is looking at a lifetime commitment to a potential foreign body reaction.
Which perfectly explains why the medical community places such a high premium on temporary, dissolving interventions.
In modern aesthetic medicine, reversibility is the absolute cornerstone of safety. If a patient has a severe adverse reaction to a hyaluronic acid filler, or if an arterial blockage is immediately recognized, a skilled doctor can flood the area with a rescue enzyme called hyaluronidase.
That dissolves the filler.
Yes. This enzyme acts as a chemical solvent, melting and dissolving the HA filler into harmless water within hours. You simply cannot dissolve a permanent synthetic plastic gel. It must be surgically excised, often leaving severe disfigurement.
Which is terrifying. And this need for temporary interventions leads us to briefly touch upon thread lifts.
A very popular procedure currently.
This procedure involves taking long, dissolving medical threads, often made of the same material used for internal surgical sutures, which are covered in tiny microscopic barbs. A doctor uses a cannula to insert these threads deep under the skin and then physically pulls them upwards.
Yes, to physically hoist the tissue.
The barbs catch on the subcutaneous fat, physically pulling and suspending the sagging tissue. Yet, despite sounding like a mechanical miracle, the official guidelines only give this procedure a weak recommendation. Why is the medical community so lukewarm on physically hoisting the face up?
Because the clinical long-term evidence does not support the aggressive marketing claims.
It doesn't last.
No. While inserting the threads does cause a mild, localized inflammatory response that stimulates a small amount of new collagen along the track of the thread, the physical lifting effect is relatively mild and notoriously temporary.
Because the threads dissolve.
Exactly. The body's immune system begins breaking down the dissolving thread immediately. As the thread degrades and loses its tensile strength, often within 6 to 9 months, the tissue inevitably succumbs to gravity once again.
So it falls right back down.
It does. Furthermore, while generally safe, complications do occur. The threads can snap, they can pucker the skin, they can cause facial asymmetry, or the sharp ends can physically protrude through the surface of the skin, requiring surgical intervention to extract them.
Oh, that sounds awful.
It is a valid temporary option for the right candidate, but patient expectations regarding longevity must be managed with absolute clinical realism.
So manage your expectations and demand reversibility. Okay, we have thoroughly covered the face and the structural aging process, but aesthetic medicine isn't solely about turning back the biological clock. It is also fundamentally about managing daily, profound physical discomforts.
It is a vital branch of the field.
Let's move our focus beyond the face. We need to talk about the burden of unwanted body hair and the deeply distressing reality of excessive sweating. Let's start with laser hair removal. I must confess, before reading this deep dive, I thought a laser was just a laser. You walk into a clinic, they zap your leg with a bright light, the hair dies, and you leave.
Most people assume that, yes.
But the actual physics governing this procedure are incredibly nuanced and, frankly, quite dangerous if misunderstood.
The physics of laser hair removal represent arguably the most critical, high-stakes application of that selective photothermolysis principle we discussed earlier.
Why isn't there just one universal laser machine for every human being?
Because human skin varies wildly in its epidermal melanin content. The overarching goal of the laser is to target the dark melanin pigment located inside the hair follicle root, heating it to roughly 70 degrees Celsius to permanently destroy the stem cells that grow the hair.
Okay, aim for the dark root.
Exactly. If a patient presents with very pale, light skin and very dark, thick hair, this is a straightforward physics equation. A standard diode laser, or an alexandrite laser, operating at around 755 nanometers, works perfectly.
Because of the contrast.
Yes. The light easily bypasses the translucent, pale skin and violently attacks the dark, contrasting hair root.
But surely that presents a massive immediate danger for anyone who doesn't fit that exact profile. If I naturally have a darker skin tone, my epidermis is rich in melanin. If the laser is blindly hunting for melanin, won't it just violently attack the surface of my skin instead of passing through to the hair follicle? Won't I just be severely burned?
That is the exact critical danger. For patients with darker skin tones classified medically on the Fitzpatrick scale as types 4 through 6, using those standard, shorter wavelength lasers runs an unacceptably high risk of inflicting severe, blistering thermal burns and permanent hyperpigmentation.
Because it hits the surface melanin instead of the root.
Yes. The laser energy is immediately absorbed by the rich melanin in the epidermis before it ever has a chance to reach the deeper hair follicle. Therefore, the medical guidelines strictly mandate that for darker skin types, a clinic must utilize an entirely different machine, the NYAG laser.
And why is the NYAG the specific hero for darker skin tones? What makes it mathematically different?
It all comes down to the physics of its wavelength. The NYAG laser operates at exactly 1,064 nanometers. This is a significantly longer wavelength than the alexandrite.
And longer wavelengths go deeper.
Exactly. In optical physics, a longer wavelength scatters far less and penetrates much deeper into human tissue. Most importantly, melanin has a much lower absorption affinity for this specific wavelength.
So it ignores the surface color.
Yes, the light effectively ignores and bypasses the surface epidermal melanin entirely. It travels deep, safely down into the dermis to strike the hair follicle at its dense root, entirely sparing the surface skin from catastrophic thermal damage.
It is a beautiful, life-saving application of matching physical wavelengths to human biological diversity. It's optical illusion via physics.
It is brilliant engineering.
And the sources also highlight a major advancement in patient comfort during these treatments, the in-motion or accumulative heat methods.
A massive relief for patients.
Instead of the traditional excruciating method where the doctor fires one massive, painful zap, moves an inch, and fires again, the modern machines continuously sweep over the skin. They rapidly fire low-energy pulses, slowly and steadily accumulating heat in the follicle until it dies.
Yes.
It's exactly like slowly turning up the heat in a warm bath until it boils, rather than jumping directly into a vat of boiling water. The nervous system doesn't register the shock in the same way.
A very apt physiological analogy. The in-motion technique drastically reduces the activation of the pain receptors in the skin, significantly increasing patient tolerance for what is historically a very uncomfortable procedure.
Whilst maintaining high clinical efficacy. Now let's pivot to a condition that affects millions of people globally, but is rarely discussed openly due to immense social stigma. Hyperhidrosis.
Yes, a very silent struggle for many.
This is the official medical term for severe, pathological, excessive sweating. We are not talking about getting a bit shiny on your forehead during a hot summer day. We're talking about primary focal hyperhidrosis. This is a condition where the sweat glands are hyperactive, completely ruining clothing, destroying confidence, and causing severe, debilitating social anxiety.
It is a genuinely debilitating medical condition that severely impacts a patient's quality of life. Now, while injecting Botox into the armpits is a very common, highly effective method to temporarily block the nerve signals to the sweat glands, it wears off every few months.
Right. But the clinical guidelines we are reviewing discuss a fascinating, permanent technological solution utilizing microwaves. And to be absolutely clear to the listeners, we are talking about utilizing a highly specific medical frequency of 5.8 gigahertz, which is entirely different from the frequency used to heat soup in your kitchen microwave.
I'm very glad you clarified that. So we aren't envisioning cooking a ready meal in our armpits.
But the fundamental mechanism must be somewhat similar. How does beaming a medical microwave into the armpit permanently stop the body from sweating?
The physics rely on dielectric heating, similar to what we discussed with radio frequency, but vastly more powerful and targeted. The 5.8 gigahertz microwave frequency is highly magnetically attracted to water molecules.
And sweat glands are full of water.
Exactly. Sweat glands are, by their very nature, completely saturated with water. The specialized device beams this intense microwave energy directly into the skin of the axilla, or armpit. The energy passes harmlessly through the dry upper layers of the epidermis. But the moment it hits the water-rich sweat glands, which are located precisely at the deep junction between the dermis and the underlying subcutaneous fat layer, it rapidly and violently heats them.
It basically boils them.
It does. The thermal energy permanently destroys the structure of the sweat gland and the associated odor-producing glands. Because human sweat glands do not possess the biological ability to regenerate once destroyed, the profound reduction in sweating is permanent.
That sounds like an absolute miracle for someone suffering in silence with this condition, a permanent cure. But reading the guidelines closely, they only give this microwave procedure a weak recommendation. If it's a permanent cure, why the hesitation from the medical establishment?
Because the sheer volume of thermal energy required to permanently boil and destroy a gland deep within the tissue is substantial. While the treatment is highly effective, the guidelines must account for the collateral damage.
The surrounding tissue.
Yes. They note potential, though rare, side effects such as temporary nerve damage in the arm, resulting in numbness or tingling, deep tissue scarring, or localized ulceration of the skin if the cooling mechanism of the device fails. It is an incredibly powerful option, but it requires a highly skilled, cautious practitioner to perfectly balance the aggressive energy delivery required for destruction with the absolute necessity of tissue safety.
Which brings us perfectly and rather soberingly to our final overarching theme today, the safety net.
The most important section of the guidelines, in my opinion.
With all these staggering, almost science fiction technological advancements, we've unpacked microwaving sweat glands, injecting lethal neurotoxins, firing lasers into the deep dermis to shatter pigment, and bypassing arteries. It is incredibly easy for a modern consumer to view these treatments as casual, breezy beauty salon trips.
The marketing actively encourages that view.
You pop in on your lunch break for a quick laser, grab a coffee, and go back to work. The marketing tells us it's just self-care. But the Japanese medical guidelines abruptly and necessarily remind us that this is actual, serious, invasive medicine.
It is a vital reality check that the industry often attempts to obscure. The Japanese guidelines detail a very strict, legally mandated safety framework that governs these clinics.
How strict are we talking?
If a severe complication occurs, such as the blindness we discussed, severe necrosis of tissue, or God forbid, an unexpected death due to an allergic anaphylactic reaction in an aesthetic clinic, the clinic manager has a strict, non-negotiable legal obligation to report the incident immediately to the National Medical Accident Investigation and Support Center.
So there is no sweeping catastrophic errors under the rug to protect a clinic's reputation.
None whatsoever.
That is reassuring, but what I found even more compelling, and frankly inspiring, is how the medical community handles the situations where things almost go horribly wrong, but don't. The guidelines dedicate significant text to the Hayari Hado database.
Yes, the near-miss reporting system.
Hayari Hado essentially translates from Japanese to describe a near-miss or a scare and startle event. It is a formalized system where clinics are actively encouraged to anonymously report minor errors, protocol failures, or near misses where, crucially, no actual harm was done to the patient.
This is a phenomenal concept borrowed directly from the rigorous safety culture of commercial aviation.
Like aeroplane safety protocols.
Exactly. Imagine a scenario where a tired nurse almost administers the wrong concentration of a chemical peel, but catches the mathematical error at the absolute last second before applying it to the patient's face.
That'd be a terrifying moment.
It would. In many high-pressure corporate or medical cultures, the immediate human instinct is to hide that mistake out of profound shame or fear of termination. The Hayari Hata system actively destigmatizes the error.
Because they want to know why it happened.
Precisely. It encourages anonymous reporting of that near miss, so the entire medical community can collectively study it through root cause analysis. They ask the systemic questions. Why did this tumult happen? Were the two different acid bottles designed to look too similar? Was the lighting in the preparation room inadequate? Was the practitioner suffering from schedule fatigue?
They are fixing the system, not just blaming the human.
Exactly. By extensively studying the near misses, the community can implement mandatory systemic changes, like color-coding vials or enforcing mandatory rest breaks to prevent a future fatal tragedy from ever occurring.
It's preventative medicine for the clinic itself.
It is. The guidelines note that over 40 distinct aesthetic-related incidents are currently registered in this database for active, ongoing study. It shifts the culture from one of punitive blame to one of collective, preventative learning.
It is an incredible culture of safety, and I think it serves as the ultimate sobering reminder for you, the listener. When you step across a threshold into an aesthetic clinic, you must mentally shift your perspective.
You must. You are not a customer at a spa.
Exactly. You aren't just a pampered client receiving a facial. You are a patient undergoing a medical procedure with inherent physiological risks. Ensuring you give properly informed consent, meaning you actually understand the terrifying mechanics of how filler can cause blindness, and fiercely advocating for yourself by choosing a highly qualified, medically trained doctor who understands vascular anatomy is absolutely paramount. You have to take your bodily safety into your own hands.
Absolutely. The pursuit of aesthetic improvement, no matter how technologically advanced, should never, ever compromise your fundamental physiological health.
What an extraordinary journey we've been on today. We have traveled from the trillions of microscopic bacteria living in your gut, transmitting stress signals to your face, up through the protective, dead brick wall of cells on your stratum corneum, and all the way down into the deep, focused ultrasound waves, physically burning and reshaping the foundational muscles of your jawline.
We have covered a vast expanse of science.
We really have. And when you view it all laid out like this, it becomes so abundantly clear that true beauty, or this pursuit of perfect skin, is never going to be found at the bottom of a single magical overpriced jar. It's an incredibly complex, lifelong synergy.
It is.
It is the marriage of daily, holistic lifestyle habits, like fiercely protecting your sleep window and actively avoiding the glycation of your collagen, combined with, when necessary, the highly precise, deeply respected application of clinical medical science and physics.
The seamless integration of optimal internal biological health and precise external physical intervention is the true defining frontier of modern aesthetic medicine.
So, to leave you with a final, slightly provocative thought to ponder as you look in the mirror tonight. We spent the hour exploring how lasers currently use physics to target melanin, and how the bacteria in your gut intimately dictate your skin's inflammation. But what if the ultimate future of skincare isn't a cream, an acid peel, a syringe of hyaluronic acid, or a laser beam at all?
What an interesting thought.
What if, a decade from now, your aesthetic doctor simply prescribes a bespoke, genetically modified strain of living bacteria? A microscopic ecosystem designed to live harmlessly and invisibly on your face, acting as a permanent, living sunscreen that physically eats UV radiation, and a continuous wrinkle repair team that synthesizes collagen while you sleep.
It would revolutionize everything we know.
It sounds like pure science fiction, but based on the astonishing intersection of biology and technology we've unpacked today, it might just be the very next logical step in our evolution. Until that day arrives, however, drink your water, guard your sleep window, and whatever you do, please don't forget to casually smear a 10-pence piece-sized amount of SPF over your face. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive.